in some ways it was just like any other game at Twickenham, but in other ways it was such a completely, way bigger than that could obviously be. %50 of me was just, as an England supporter, I was over the moon that we won the World Cup. But it's 50% of me as a player that was so disappointed that it could have been us 12 years ago. I love looking at pictures of tries that I've scored, not because of me scoring the try, but looking at the crowd in the background. Seeing the reaction on their faces and their lights, their faces lit up, and some of them are still thinking, has he scored? Some of them with their arms up in the air, some are already cheering, and all that sort of stuff. That is fantastic.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lights, Camera, Combat podcast. The podcast where we speak to incredible people with inspirational stories from a life in connection to combat and shine a light on it. Over the course of this series, I'll be sitting down with veterans turned TV presenters, incredible athletes, right through to World War II veterans to help me and hopefully you find the light at the end of any tunnel. On today's episode, we sit down for part 2 of the incredible conversation with England rugby legend Rory Underwood. Part 1, which dropped yesterday on the YouTube channel, is all about Rory's incredible career in the RAF and becoming an RAF pilot, and today we hear all about how he went on to set countless rugby records for England and also for the British and Irish Lions. This is a great chat, getting into the mind of a sportsman who played at the highest, most competitive elite level, international rugby, running out into World Cup finals. All of that we will be hearing in this episode, so make sure you keep listening. But before we get into the episode, I just want to put a quick word out about next week. Next week we will be dropping our VE Day special, our documentary, which will be going live on Thursday. It will be dropping exclusively on YouTube on Thursday, and then we'll be going out on other podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify, on Friday. And tomorrow on all our audio platforms we will be dropping an incredible full extended podcast interview from the subject of the documentary, which will then be dropping next Friday on YouTube. So make sure you stay across all of the different platforms, but don't miss next week. Next Thursday we'll be dropping the documentary. A lot of time, a lot of work has gone into that, and it is an awesome story that we can't wait to share with you all. But for now, let's get into today's episode with England's record try scorer, Rory Underwood. So wherever you are, however you listen, sit back and enjoy this episode of Lights, Camera, Combat. So I want to talk a bit about rugby, and I want to get into it, but I'm just going to throw some stats over to you that you're probably already aware of just before we start. So 85 appearances for England, 49 tries, 13th most capped England international of all time, leading record try scorer of all time, playing between 84 and 96, 3 World Cups, British and Irish Lions, playing in an England team with your brother for the first time that ever happened since 1937. First ever time to happen where you both score a try in the same match. As well as that, you held the record for the most appearances for England and the Lions as a back until Johnny Wilkinson. When you hear all those sorts of statistics, how does that make you feel?
Exceptionally proud, for obvious reasons. Little did I know when I set out on the rugby journey that I would be sitting here having somebody rattle that off. Very, very proud, very honoured, very privileged, and at my age now, also it's a situation where sometimes it's the dim and distant past of, I last played for England in '96, so that's coming up for 30 years. It sometimes seems surreal when you look back, because you see the game now. The game's moved on. It's The guys are fitter and faster than we were. The teams are much more organised than we were. And it seems, sometimes it seems a different game, but it's the same game. And I still enjoy watching it and go down to watch Tigers all the time. But it's also a bit of, and I had great times. I had so many great people and teams and people I played with, played against, been on some great tours, got some great memories. It's a massive part of my life.
And there's statistics in there that there'll be many statistics, even just not rattling off the fact of holding a joint record for 5 tries in a match. These sorts of things where there's succeeding in playing professional sport, which in itself is ridiculously challenging to do, and then there's going on to become one of the best players to ever do it, and arguably the best player in a specific position to ever do it. When you look back now, and you kind of touch on the fact there of nearly 30 years ago since the last time you played for England, and that some of those records, the try record, cleared by 13, quite a gap, especially when you look at the distance of numbers between the people below you. There's a massive gap there that you've got. Does it maybe highlight the impact on the game that you've had, the more time that passes when you look back, and the records that you made at the time are still records?
It's not for me to talk about the impact I had on the game. All I can say is that I was very privileged to play at a time when we had that success during the 90s. Because bear in mind, I played for 12 years, and the first 4 years of my time was fairly average for England. I scored 4 tries in my first 4 years playing for England. We were a pretty average side. Nowhere near close to winning the 5 Nations at all. And then things changed when Jeff Cook came in, 88. We had that famous victory against Australia at Twickenham, played some exciting brand of rugby. I scored 2 tries that day. And, that team that he picked that day became the sort of embryonic squad that went on to be the successful team that made, losing the Grand Slam decider in Murrayfield in 1990, win the Grand Slam in 91, get to a World Cup final in 91, won a Grand Slam in 92, won a Grand Slam in 93, and I think in between that, at least winning one more championship. So, I was very, very fortunate to play during a time when England had a really, really good crop of players coming through, which obviously helped me score my tries. I'll be the first to say, I scored 49, but I was just the last person that touched the ball before I scored. Yeah, there's a few tries I had to do a bit of work for and stuff, but fundamentally, I always tell people I wouldn't have scored those tries if the 14 other people on the pitch didn't get the ball to me.
And there's the specific instances I want to go into, but firstly one that you've just sort of brought up, a World Cup final. What's that like? Most people can only ever dream of being in that kind of environment. I
know, and especially our World Cup final was actually at home, so it was a special one. I always describing it itself, it's in some ways it was just like any other game at Twickenham, but in other ways it was such a completely, way bigger than that could obviously be. And there's a lot of talk about it. You're too young to remember it, but there's a lot of talk about the tactics we played and various things. I mean, from my perspective, it's one of my highlights, because not many people can say they've been to a World Cup final. But it's one of my lowlights because we lost the game, and we lost it 12-6. It was a close game. It's one of those things in sport. Sometimes it's your time, sometimes it isn't. That day, we didn't play well. A handful of us didn't have good games. I'm not picking anybody out, so I probably put myself in there. We just didn't quite click that day for some reason, whether it was the occasion, the awe, whatever it was, I don't know. And I wouldn't say I regret it, because we try to prepare beforehand. You think you do everything you needed to do, but obviously that performance that day was not, it didn't warrant to win that day. And it brought it home to me. Obviously we were all disappointed and gutted, but it brought it home to me when 12 years later I was actually in the stadium in Australia watching Johnny Wilkinson kick that drop goal over, and then when the final whistle went, I was with all the other mad England supporters in the stadium that jumping around, and so 50% of me was just as an England supporter, I was over the moon that we won the World Cup. But it's 50% of me as a player that was so disappointed that it could have been us 12 years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't rue and regret it per se. I don't wallow in that self-pity about it. You play sports, and you know I've got more in my credit in my positive tank than I do in my negative tank.
Yeah, 100%, and I think that's a super important outlet to have anyway. And do you think that the preparation for that game was any different? Did it feel different? Obviously, the scale of the game is obviously going to make it.
Yeah.
But did it? Was there anything that you did as a team differently that you think might have?
Well, therein lies the sort of it's gone in folklore as to whether we massively changed our tactics that day from where we've played before. I mean, my view always has been our tactics have always been relatively the same. We just make a few tweaks here and there depending on the side we play against, and that's my recollection of it all. I don't remember us. The thing is, if we'd won that, nobody would have made a comment about the tactics. The fact is, I don't think we played well, which then it just exacerbates the fact that it didn't quite go our way. So there are some people, few that we try to run it a bit too much than we should have done. All I remember is we didn't play as well as we could have done. And if you wanted to go back to every single game and dissect what could have gone or might have done or what would have been, whatever, you'll drive yourself into an early grave.
And that one, kind of speaking of the home World Cup there, how can you articulate that feeling of walking out to a packed Twickenham, you know, singing and that atmosphere? How can you put that feeling as a player into words?
The best way I can do it is, if you've never been to a Twickenham stadium, it obviously becomes harder because having it come across on the TV is never quite the same. But if you're watching on TV and when the England players run onto the pitch and you hear the crowd go up and you get a sense of pride, hair on the back of your neck stick up on end, and you're watching it on TV. But if you're at the stadium at Twickenham and you hear and feel the roar go up when the England team run out on the pitch, and you feel that, you know, that sense, the roar, you feel it, hear it, and you have the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. Just try and imagine, you know, multiply that however you think, what it's like when you're actually wearing a white shirt and you walk out the tunnel onto the pitch when the crowd goes up. Never mind when you sing the national anthem. So, you know, for us that have the privilege of actually wearing the England shirt and running out on the pitch, it's one of life's, you know, fortunate thing that I've had in my life to be able to do. But from a team sport, especially from a rugby perspective, and especially for England, I mean, you apply it for whichever team you support, obviously. But for England supporters and England players, you know, that's the height, to be able to have the privilege to walk onto the pitch that day to represent your country.
Do you miss it?
Oh yeah, I 100% miss that. I 100% miss that. I 100% miss running on the try line and scoring. I love looking at pictures of tries that I've scored, not because of me scoring the try, but looking at the crowd in the background, seeing the reaction of their faces and their lights, their faces lit up, and some of them are still thinking, has he scored? Some of them with their arms up in the air, some are already cheering, and all that sort of stuff. You know, that is fantastic.
So what's that feeling then? If there's a contrasting feeling to walking out to scoring, what does it feel like to score?
Well, the thing about playing rugby, especially at the highest level, there's a certain amount you can feel, but a certain amount where you're focused. And so I was never one that I personally hate pre-celebration. It just partly it's a behavioural values thing, and partly is, especially when you're professionals, that one day you get caught out, you're a professional sportsman, especially if you saw there somebody who made score tries, and you don't score the try because of, it doesn't matter. So invariably, the feeling up till I score the try is difficult to articulate because I'm just focused on what I need to do
to get there,
to beat the person and get there, and then make sure I get the ball down. Once you've scored, then you get that sense, and sometimes you don't feel it all.
Yeah.
You know, when I beat Cyril Lowe's record to be the most try scorer for England, like 19 or whatever it was, or something like that, I knew it was the record, and I scored in the corner against Ireland. And as I got up, I did. If you've watched the highlights, you'll see me. I just clenched my fist and I looked up slightly because it was in the southwest corner, and so my wife and the family were in the stand. So there was a sort of acknowledgement of, you know,
done it.
That's a good. I mean, that was, I think, 19 tries or 18. And obviously I've scored another 30 odd tries.
Yeah.
So, you know, and of course the world is slightly different now. You know, we scored a try, the most you got was a handshake, or possibly a pat on the back.
Yeah.
Or most of the forwards just turn around and get back to the place because they, you know. Whereas now it's hollering, hooping, and it's a bit like football, which is fine. I get that. It's just the way the times have changed, and it's that spirit. But it wasn't quite like that when we played. It's well done, Rory.
Yeah.
So there wasn't that same hoopla. I mean, of my 49 tries, I would say it'd be single figures of any that you actually see me celebrate or even acknowledge something after I've scored.
Which is probably a question you get all the time, but which specific ones? Not even just one, but
yeah, it's the same answer every time. It depends.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
So first try.
Yeah.
First hat trick.
Yeah. 5
tries.
Yeah.
First one for Lions.
Yeah.
Helping to win the Triple Crown against Ireland when we were losing, which then went on in '91, which went on to win the Grand Slam in '91 against France. Sometimes it's because of the circumstance of the match which changes things. Sometimes it's the try itself. So there's all differing. You know, the first one for obvious reasons. My second game for England, first try. 2 reasons I think. Against France, we lost, but still, I wasn't a one-cap wonder.
Yeah.
And I scored my first try. So I've not only have I got a cap for England, I'm not a one-cap wonder, but I got my try.
Yeah.
So for as a youngster, as a 20-year-old, my second game for England, you know, sense of pride for that. But then still disappointed because we lost the game.
And you were at that point. You talk about the biggest, one of the biggest concerns being not just a one-cap wonder. Therefore, there was no thought of how far can we go. There was no goal to become a record holder in any capacity.
No, it's one of those things I always find very difficult to answer because I became the most capped England player when I played against Fiji obviously in Fiji with 43. I think Tony Neary was the most capped at 42, and I was the most capped 43. And I think it was the 91 tour. I think I was on the 91 tour. I think, and no, it was before that because. Oh no, it would have been because I got my 50th against Scotland in the semi-final. I think I remember that. But people want to know about, you know, do you think about records? Do you try and do that? In some ways, I do, but it doesn't. It's not prevalent. I don't go. I need to score a try because I need to get that record. I don't think like that. I'm aware of it, and you sort of score a try. Oh, I'm another try closer to it or whatever. But I don't sort of think I need to score a try. I need to score a try. I don't. You know, once I beat Cyril Lowe's try, there was no other record per se.
Yeah, of course.
My record was it.
Yeah.
So my mindset always has been, I'm going to score a try whether it's my record or not. I'm not going to score a try because of a record, and it's not my record, so I'm not going to score a try. You know, I'm going to score tries. That's my part of my raison d'être as a winger, is to do that. I'm doing everything I can to score a try for me and my team.
Yeah. I'm conscious that there were questions that will get peppered to you and will undoubtedly become the most frustrating questions to receive
That's
a lot
all right.
of the time. If and then this might be something that you don't, it's difficult to answer in certain ways, but in your own words, in your own opinion, would you define yourself as a rugby legend?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer. I'm a relatively modest sort of guy, so that's a very difficult question for someone like me to answer. It's more for other people and things. When you hear, when you see people put up my all-time greatest England 15 or the best England players or whatever, and you end up being in some of that list, God, it makes you feel, a sense of pride that other people think that of you, and that's the sort of way I think. Should I put myself in that list? Oh God, no! I couldn't do that. That's not me. That's not the way I'd do it.
And I think it's very respectful, very commendable, modest mindset. But then you look at if you're putting yourself in there, it's highly it's not going to be unjustified, is it? You talk through the records that you own and records that you've owned for a long time. I think that probably answers the question for itself.
Well, to a certain extent, but that's fine. But that's not for me.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like anything else, the hardest thing to do is like, how good do we think we were players like back in the pre-war, pre-First World War? So how do you compare and contrast?
Yeah.
One of the wingers I looked up to, I remember seeing, in my early days, was David Duckham. Didn't play in many games, didn't score as many tries, but his blonde hair and his dashing style, he's a lot of people's favourites from the 60s and 70s. How do you compare and contrast now to, and of course my time and 30 years ago, how do you compare and contrast current wingers and future wingers against us when we're, amateurs? And the thing is, I'm not trying to say it's right or wrong, but that's, to be honest with you, it's just like anything else. It's the beauty about the sport and people sitting in a pub or in a lounge or on a dining table having a debate about who should or who shouldn't be on the list and what they do. And that's sport for you. So, there'll be people out there think I'm the greatest and some people out there think I'm not the greatest.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
What does it feel like to be somebody that people look up to? Inspired to be like? Yeah,
it's something that I don't seek, as in I expect it or want it or whatever. I like to think I'm grounded, and I like to think that my assumption is that not everybody knows who I am, and that is the case. I sometimes go places and I start talking and people just don't know who I am, and that's fine. I don't expect them to. I've got to an age now, it's been 30 years since anybody saw me in an England shirt, so you weren't born.
Yeah.
So why would I expect anybody of your age to know who I am, unless you find that parents who know I am, I've got kids and they talk about, and the great Rory Underwood, the great this, Johnny May. And of course, Johnny May, until he retired a year or so ago, crikey, he was the one that kept my name in light for the last 5 years. Because he was the one that eventually broke Will Greenwood's amount, and he overtook Greenwood, and he was the next one behind me. And so every time Johnny May scored, the commentary said, and he's got another one catching up with Rory Underwood. So he's got 36 tries, Rory Underwood. So my name got mentioned all the time in dispatches. But then people would sort of hear that name, but wouldn't know necessarily what I look like, what I'm doing now, in the context. And so people see me, and of course, of an age now, people see me and see 50% of people that will recognise me as a rugby player.
Yeah.
Of that 50%, less than 25% would probably recognise me that flew jets as well.
Yeah.
Because of the circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely.
A bit like yourself, you weren't aware that, I get people like yourself sort of go, did you do the rugby first?
Yeah.
Then you did, And then when you say, no, I did 18 years in the Air Force and I did 14 years playing at Leicester Tigers, you sort of go, well, that can't compute. You can't do that long, one after the other. No, look, I don't, it's, it is what it is.
Mm. Is it a when you're playing? Was it difficult to linking the two back together, and you sort of the peak of your playing powers, recognisability at that point, was that maybe not a challenge, but something you were conscious of when you would then go and do your day job, for lack of a better term, and kind of just people out in the street or whatever?
It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't an issue for me. I didn't make it an issue. I didn't think about it consciously and go, "Oh my God," whatever. It's if it happens, it happens. Sometimes I get recognised, sometimes I don't. I still get recognised. I got stopped in St Pancras the other day. There's an ex-para just said, "Just want to say, thank you for all the stuff you've did." Didn't know him, no idea. Obviously, he was in the paras while I was still playing, but he remembered and he said, "Good on you," and he just walked on. I mean, that's brilliant. That's great. I have no problem with that. It's great. That's not. I have no problem with it. It makes you feel good, obviously. But I don't seek it or want it or whatever. I think our generation have been lucky. We've most rugby players. We're nowhere near the sort of A-listers of either football or the sort of famous A-listers of cinema screen and that sort of stuff. Where they, and especially pop music, where they feel they need to have bodyguards and go everywhere and just their life must be horrendous. I don't have that. I've never had that. I've been able to live in a village, with the family, walk around, do everything. Yes, get recognised every now and then, but not been to the detriment of just getting on with life.
You, I've heard you talk before about your mum in attendance to some of the matches you played. What would that feeling be like? And that ties into then the feeling of when you started to play with Tony as well.
I mean, your parents. There's those that see. I guess all the time how my mum is, and there's a lot of people talk about very fondly of seeing her on TV when Tony and I were playing, and you see her in the crowd, and it's fantastic. It really is. I've been every corner of the earth, and somebody will ask me how my mum is, which is fantastic. But of course, when you talk about mums, and you'd be no different, and mum starts supporting you from the first time you go and play something or other, or go run around the park, or school sports day. So my mum's been watching me since I was obviously night or a grasshopper, and watching me play cricket, watching me play rugby, and all that sort of stuff. So it's just natural progression from that. Now, from my perspective, my dad was not there to see me play for England. That's, I say, it's not a regret, but it's what might have been. He could have enjoyed those years of driving me to go to Middlesbrough, driving me around the north of England to go to these rugby games. They just jumped in the Traveller. They all drove down to Portsmouth to go and watch me play in that. Bless them, my siblings had to drive down and watch Rory play rugby again. Bless them. But for him, to him to have seen the game and see me run up, I'd like to think, he'd have been filled with immense pride, as you'd expect. So your parents watching is something that you see a lot more now. The TV and the cameras we've got. At the time, it was a new novelty, and of course, having two brothers made it a sort of a. But the stories I go. There's a guy who used to, in the old days, he didn't, before having the gyroscopes, so he'd have like a normal sort of camera on his shoulder, so it'd be like a broadcast quality VHS type thing. It's quite a big one. He used to turn up in his tracksuit bottoms. I used to tell you, this, if it goes on, if you ever, I'd love to meet the guy again. We used to meet each other for the game, and he goes, yeah, because he used to run up and down, physically run up and down the thing, trying to keep up, and he'd be there to do the action. But he didn't have the whole, gyroscope thing, which keeps the weight of the camera. So he'd running around in his kit, and so for a few years he was doing the camera. I don't know what he's doing now. He must be still doing it. I don't know. Actually, I must find out. That's giving me a bit of a task. I'm going to start asking questions around of BBC and find out what's happened to him. I'd love to meet him again. We all have a great story to tell. He's helped me score a few tries, I'm sure. He's filmed me running down the pitch. I had this thing of me running as fast as I can. He's running beside me with a camera on his shoulder trying to do the film. Where have I got to? I'm just waffling now. So, my mum picked down the stand. And so to me, it wasn't anything. It was there. My wife, my siblings, my kids were too young to really understand that at all, so they didn't really come to any games. But seeing my wife and obviously my mum and my siblings there, it obviously helps, especially when you're being successful in scoring tries. And the thing is, again, like Tony was, yes, we didn't play sport with each other because he's too young. It was myself and Gary, but then he started playing rugby, getting to a good level, and then he joined Leicester Tigers. We started playing Leicester Tigers for 2-3 years before he got picked for England. So I was used to playing rugby with him at Tigers, so I was used to it. And so then he got picked to play for England, and it was just like an extent. Obviously, I was very proud, as a brother would be, that he stepped up the table and he's joining me on the big table.
Did it feel any different playing with him to before?
No, it's just one of the things I'm sort of person that I don't tend to use that per se. I'm definitely, I never thought about the opposition directly per se, and that's not being disingenuous or disrespectful to the opposition. I always thought about what I needed to do and concentrate what I could do, because that's what I can control, whilst acknowledging that I got an opponent and I've got to be at my best to stop him doing what he wants to do and whatever. So that was always my thing. I always worked about, I never try to think, oh my God, it's so and so, oh my God, they do this, oh my God, they do that. I may other times, but once I focus the game, I'm just concentrating on getting myself focused for the game. So to that end, my game then, especially when you're playing for England, it sort of pushes out all the other peripheral stuff and just gets rid of it all. So whether my wife's in the stand or my mum or Tony's on the other wing, I just get rid of all that and just concentrate on the game at hand. Now, the game you're talking about against Scotland, I scored a try and I actually put Tony in for a try. So it's the first brothers that have scored since a long time ago. There's another set of brothers, but a long time ago, which seems strange. You'd think it'd be more because there's been a few brothers played for England, but both scoring is interesting because you've got the Curry brothers, you've got Armitage brothers, the Vunipola brothers. It just, I don't use that to fuel my focus for the game. I very much focus. I worry and control what I can do, rather than let any other factor try and control it.
Does that game stand out as one of the special ones though for you when you look back?
It does, but of course, there's different factors for why. There's games that the '91 World Cup stands out, but for two different reasons. First Grand Slam, first game. There's all different reasons why games stand out. Some that I score tries, some that I don't score tries. That particular one was sort of a comeback because a lot of people felt I made a big mistake and cost us the game against Wales in Cardiff. So that Scotland game was 2 weeks later. So you talk about bounce back ability, you talk about resilience. You don't suddenly become a bad player overnight. So for that to happen there, and then 2 weeks later we beat Scotland quite convincingly. I scored a try and put Tony in for a try. It lifts you back up again to where people try to put you down to, but trying to stay at the level you should be.
Yeah, you in professional sport, in international sport, and in the RAF, there are two jobs that you've done where
I haven't really done professional rugby.
Or
I was semi-professional for about 3 years.
In terms of
highest level.
Yes. International, playing for your country in rugby, and being in the RAF, both very, very highly adrenaline fueled environments, and being able to reach these incredible highs in both aspects. When they both stopped in a relative short time span with one another, was there a come down for you to not being able to get that kick anywhere, or how did you find the ways to still...
No, it wasn't for me. Whilst I thoroughly enjoyed the highs of playing rugby for England, especially at Twickenham, and especially when you win, it's brilliant, obviously. I didn't pine for it. It goes back to some of the things I said before about why I do it. It is great. I sort of look at it as it's just the result of doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So if I'm scoring tries and winning games, we'll get that anyway. So if you get both, then it's great. You're in a good place. Flying jets it's one of those things that I did a lot of rugby games. I played at Twickenham a lot of times, but I didn't do that as many times as I was in jets flying around at low level. I did way more time flying at low level than I did playing rugby for my country. So technically, you got 85, which if you don't include tour games, I played for England 85 times. It's probably 40% of it was at Twickenham. So I only played, 30 games, 35 games at Twickenham. Is that 35 hours?
Yeah.
Plus a third.
Yeah.
So a third. So 10. So 45 hours. I've got 3,000 hours flying jets. Not all that's at low level, but a lot of times at low level. I've got 750 hours flying Hawks. I know a lot of that was at low level. So the two things is I don't do it for the high at that instant. I recognise and enjoy the high afterwards, because like anything else, you've got to be. A lot of people can get a real high and become really taken up with the situation, and if they don't control it, it can impact their performance. And to a certain extent, when you're flying, you become used to it. You become inured to the fact that it's, wow, I still enjoyed it. I'll give you an example of what I missed most about flying. But it becomes the norm. So the fact you're getting airborne at 150 miles an hour and then you're at 300 miles an hour virtually within 10 seconds, and then 5 minutes later you're flying around at 450 miles an hour at low level. That was my normal workspace.
Yeah.
I'd go and our next door neighbours, we'd known them friends for like 30 odd years, and say, oh, what did you got today, Rory? Oh yeah, I just popped to Germany for the day. What? I did an exercise, flew to Germany, did lunch, and then came back and did an exercise and flew back. What?
Yeah.
So for a civilian, that thought, I spent 2 hours flying low level. It's difficult for people that have never flown to really fully contribute. It's like, okay, I've seen the red arrows, but I don't know anything else. I've seen a bit of Top Gun, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
So the point being is that if you think about the way I control the controllables. I control what I need to do. I take what I need to be able to try and make sure I concentrate. So when I in a game situation at a match at Twickenham, all I would do before a game was just clear my head of crap and just focus on the game as much as possible. So all that hype and whatever, yes, it's there, but I'm trying to not allow it to overtake things. And it's tough because you've got pre-match, you've got all the buzz of the players in the room, you've got all the yelling and shouting, and you got the coaches telling you what to do. Then you end up with the last 15 of you before you go out and you do your last fine bits together, which is at that particular time is the essence of what I miss the most about the game. There's 15 of us in that room, you're shoulder to shoulder, you're just about to go and take on a side, and that's that England team. But that's what I was with my time at Tigers, with the Lions and whatever, that team that you get together just before you go out, brothers in arms. It's a fantastic feeling, it really is. And you can never quite replace it now. You can to a certain extent with just seeing pals and friends, and certain friends you've got that you have that. But when it's that real physical battle you're just about to go on to, there's something about it that makes it a bit extra. And to a certain extent, I wouldn't say that I didn't get anything near like that when you think about it from a flying perspective. We didn't have that. I never went to war, and that's probably where you might have had something like that. Because it's a legal physical battle.
Yeah. So, then to touch on what you just mentioned, what is the biggest thing you miss about flying?
Flying. If people ask me what superhero, they call it superhero thing you'd want.
Your ability. Yeah.
Fly.
Yeah.
So like Superman, Hancock, whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's strange because I wouldn't say completely, but I'm a little bit scared of heights. So you stick me on a ladder and stick me on the side of the house. But there's a difference because when I'm in an aircraft, I'm strapped into an ejection seat and I'm in control. So I can be up at 30,000 feet and flip the aircraft over on his back, and I've got no problem. But when you're 15, 20 feet and you're trying to change a light bulb or do something in the house or whatever. It's like, but it's the first thing I had is that I did some flying, which is more of an applied flying. So general aviation might get this. They sort of get airborne, they can potter around where they want to, but they've got to do it above 2,000 feet. They can't fly low level. They could do aerobatics, but you need to have the right aircraft to do it, and you can only do it at certain places and at a certain height. A lot of general aviation is just about getting from A to B. So you might go and potter around and go and look around the coast, or you want to go to the 2K and go for lunch or whatever. The thing about it in the military is we're actually applying it as in a job perspective. We're actually doing it for a reason, other than just getting from A to B. We have a reason for wanting to get to somewhere in the on the map, and obviously drop bombs on it or fire guns or whatever. So there's a tactical reason for doing it, and the ability to do that and fly tactically is another added skill. Just getting airborne and flying A to B, you need the skill of navigation and being able to apply that. And the weather, it's a gorgeous day today, bit of cloud, stay out of the cloud. When you're flying around low level, you've got to fly at low level, 7 miles a minute. It always makes me smile when they talk about, and I get it right, be safe, and you shouldn't text and whatever when you drive a car. But I'd be piloting my Hawk, and the Hawk has got no navigational system on it. It's just a basic trainer. So we had a map. So literally I have a map which could be that long, which I had to fold. We had to get it origami, and we should stuff it in our pocket, and then we stick it on the combing. So we'd have the combing. But as we're navigating, we'd look at the map and look at our heading. What time is the next turning point? Where is it? What's next? How are we doing? How are we doing against? Because all our information on this map. So we've got our fuel on the map. You've got the expected fuel, radio frequencies, safety altitudes. If for any reason you're going to cloud and you need to make yourself you're at high enough levels, you don't fly into any hills or anything like that. Simulated SAM sites, surface-to-air missiles, etc. It's all that information on the map. So I'm flying along 7 miles a minute, and I'll get a map out and I'm looking at it. And you're not allowed to do on the road, but I'm being facetious. But it's a bit like the old days when we used to all drive around before sat-navs, before TomToms, and we used to drive around with a AA road map that's on our laps, on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate, because it's the way you had to do it in those days.
Yeah.
So, but the point being is that element of flying is what I really enjoyed doing. The whole context of how do you get from A to do a mission to then come back to B or back to A, navigate it, hit the target on time, be safe, don't run out of fuel, and get your formation round. And that applied flying, that next level up on just getting from A to B in the civilian world, is a challenge. It's not something that anybody can just pick up and just do. As you can imagine, a lot of people don't even know what an ordnance survey map is, don't know how to read it, don't understand how to decipher what's on there. And we're doing it at 7 miles a minute.
Yeah.
And trying to fly to get to a target, but then you're getting delayed because of a fighter trying to shoot you down.
Yeah.
And you've got to work out how to get yourself back on time again.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating, exhilarating, challenging, problem-solving situation you're in, which I actually loved. So I describe myself as I'm a mud mover, 100%. I loved the aspect of flying low. Yes, part of it was being able to be in the weeds, flying really low, hence mud moving. But it was the application of how you did that to try and achieve the target.
Yeah.
So it wasn't for the sake of burning holes in the sky per se.
Yeah.
There's a real practical reason for doing it, and the skill required to do it is one that I thought I did reasonably okay at it, and I really enjoyed doing it. But part of it as well is that the UK, I would quietly just stare at maps all day. I just love maps, where things are, what they are. But you start looking at historical maps and look at the way they were then and how they've developed now and that sort of stuff. And so what's interesting is that when I think about the UK, I see the map of the UK. You think about it, I get airborne out of here, I fly up the east coast, there's the washes over there, but then I got a Flamborough Head, the Spurn Head, Dunbar Estuary coming out, then I got Flamborough Head, near Scarborough, and I got the Tees, Sunderland, Newcastle sort of exits out of the the rivers, and then you go first and you've got Stabs, St Abbs Head, then you get round further round towards up towards the Moray, further forth, and you've got the rock out, Bell Rock out there, and it spins around again to the Moray Firth, then I come down the side. So the world I can see the map of the UK, big to small. And so the whole world of, I've flown virtually all the different parts of the UK, and I can see it like a map when I fly around, and especially at low level.
Yeah.
Certain masts have a certain way. There's a 177 feet, which on the ground it sounds a lot, but when you're flying around, it's obviously a bit smaller and you fly. But there's a 177 mast in Wales. We call it rocket mast because the way it's shaped is quite slightly wide at the bottom. It's quite substantial, and it looked like a rocket shaped. So we used to call it rocket mast. And you've got Belmont Tower, which is like 1,200 foot, which is just a TV tower, which is flipping straight, back, which is straight with lots of wires, so you get very close to it for obvious reasons. So all these sort of things, just different things that we have to think about as pilots flying around at a level, but the average Joe probably doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's what I miss the most. So what I miss the most, I articulate this to me. I remember I was when we moved from, I don't know, my squadron, 100 squadron, moved from Whitton up to Fittingley near Doncaster. Whitton was down near Huntingdon, south of Peterborough. Moved up to Fittingley for about 18 months, and then we moved up to 2 years, then we moved to Leaming up in North Yorkshire. And then one of the points when we moved, the squadron goes, right, poke off squadron, go away for 2 weeks, go and detach, so that the logistics can all be done to move the squadron up to the next base. And one time we got sent up to Lossiemouth. We based out of Lossiemouth. We just did 2 weeks of flying up there. So we flew with all the squadrons up there and various things, but we had a lot of spare time. And we had some spare hours to do. And, that 2 weeks, every now and then I got an hour trip there. Take over an hour, take a jet, go and fly around Scotland, practicing, my low level stuff. And I can remember it was it's really windy, the trees are floating around today, but I got airborne about August time, so I can remember it's August because the weather was blue sky, blue sky, just not a cloud. It was not a breath of wind, it was just a still day in August. I got airborne at 8 o'clock in the morning. I literally got airborne out of Lossiemouth. 5 minutes later I dropped down to low level. I was flying towards the west coast, all down the valleys, down the Great Glen and that sort of stuff. And we were flying down one valley, whether it's a Great Glen or not I can't remember now, but I can remember flying down one of the glens with a lock in it, and because it was so still, the water was flat as a pancake. It was like a mirror. The glens, they tend to be very U-shaped because they're very glacial, and so it was browns and purples and sort of greens and oranges. There were waterfalls coming down the other side, and I was flying down this lock over the water. It was this mirror image we could see up and down, and it's just like 7, 8, 10 minutes after I got airborne out of Lossiemouth into this 8 o'clock. It was just perfect. I can remember saying to myself, fuck me, I'm being paid to do this. I was flying down this lock at 200 feet, 420 knots. Very privileged to be in that position. And part of that was just that sense of that flying bit you can do, and you can do it at low level. It's not for the sake of flying low level to scare, people and cows and sheep or whatever. But it's the application of why you fly low level and what you're trying to do was the bit that I missed the most. So, I'd quite happily buy a country somewhere if I was as rich as Bezos or Elon Musk. I'd buy a country somewhere. I'd buy myself a couple of Hawks, and I'd fly low level around it every day.
Yeah. It's something I suppose it was from when you leave, you can't replicate it anymore.
No, I've had the privilege of flying Hawks since. I've had a few trips. The squadron, at its 100th anniversary, they took me flying in a Hawk. I flew with the Reds once as well, and various other things. So it's been a privilege. I've had a chance to fly since I left the Air Force. But no, you can't. And so I sometimes get people saying to me, "Do you still fly?" Thinking that I still fly in the sense of do what I do, and of course I can't. You're not allowed to. And I sometimes thought about it, but I've still been involved with rugby, so my weekends, half the weekends taken up. it's not the cheapest hobby you can pick is flying. So
Yeah.
there's a multitude of reasons why I don't fly, and the main reason is because the flying I do wouldn't replicate what I miss about the flying I did before.
Okay, so before we wrap up, it's been an unbelievable chat. Where are you now? Just talk a little bit about what it is you're doing now and.
Well, very quickly, I was coming to the end of my Air Force career, and because of the circumstances, the way that my Air Force career panned, I decided I didn't want to stay in past my 38 points. I left at 38. I was planning to go into the airlines. I was going to go and become a jumbo jet pilot for BA. Circumstances happened. I ended up falling into doing some management leadership program for somebody. Earned a bit of money around it with these other two guys, and I thought this is quite a good idea. So I thought I started the company up. So that's what started me going into the management leadership teamwork type world. And 25 years later, I've morphed from that previous company into my own company, Wingman. It started out in the management leadership and team, high performance team sort of world, and is now morphed into a strategy consultancy where I help companies. I make sure and help them and enable them to deliver their strategy effectively. So by way of understanding the strategy, by way of making sure their environment, their structure, their people, etc. that they have in the organizations are set up to be able to deliver strategy, and then make sure there are plans set in place to allow for sustainable growth and success after that. So that's my day job now, and that's what I run, and I don't love it. As part of that problem solving I've mentioned once before about flying, there's a problem solving. Each company, most of the stuff that's going on there is similar to what's going wrong, but each of the companies got slightly different nuances because of their industry or the people and various things. So being able to work with a company and seeing them go from starting to then 6 months later and a year later and seeing progression is what gives me that buzz in a different way. It's not quite the same as buzzing around at 200 feet or whatever, or scoring a try at Twickenham, but when you win a contract, I get a buzz from your contract, especially when they're big ones. And so that's what my time spent now.
And if there's people listening that would be interested in finding out more about the business and stuff that you're working on now, how can they find out?
The easiest way would be either look for me on LinkedIn, and my company name is Wingman, so it's Wingman Limited. So if you do a search for Rory Underwood or Wingman on Google, you'll come with my website. Have a look on there, and there's a facility to contact me if you want to do any work as well.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Honestly, one of the best conversations I've ever had. And if you don't put yourself up in the category for best to ever play, I'll put yourself up there for you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
But it's been such an awesome chat.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Pleasure. Thank you.